16th, 2024. How's everybody doing? Cool. Well, we'll have Janice do a roll call.
Absolutely, let's see. Town of Ashland, Mr. Martin. Mr. Root. Chesterfield County, Mr. Plymale. Mr. Richwine. Richland County, Mr. Basham.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Goyne. Henrico County, Mr. Dixon. Lucas County, Ms. Guthrie.
Here.
City of Richmond, Mr. Bunn.
Here.
Chair Erickson.
Here.
Ms. Almond. Mr. Smith. Chamber RVA, Mr. Easter.
Here.
League of Women Voters, Ms. Weisiger. Here. Ms. Rosenblum. NAACP, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Willis. RABA, Mr. Burnley.
Here.
Mr. Hamilton. Equitable Transit and Mobility, Ms. Rowan. RVA Rapid Transit, Ms. Power.
Here.
Senior Connections, Mr. Williams. Virginia Conservation Network, Mr. Gordon. Ms. Higgins. Virginia's for High Speed Rail, Mr. Testerman.
Here.
VCU, Mr. Leonard. Mr. McClellan. That concludes the roll call for attendance. We do have a quorum.
Okay. Well, in that case, could we have a motion to approve the minutes for the last meeting?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right. So approved. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Or any public comment?
Not aware of any requests for public comment.
Okay. I don't think I have anything specific as the chair to report. And we'll do updates.
Yeah, so the updates are in the packet, we're up to page 7. If you flip to that, it's the agency updates, and I don't know if, don't see Mr. Parkinson's here today, I know he's asked to give an update on CBTA. Martha, did you wanna share anything about Plan RVA side of things, or no?
I'll just say, I was gonna say good morning, but I guess it's like good midday. I haven't been to the CTAC meeting in a while, so I just wanted to say hi. I'm the executive director here at Plan RVA, and I am also supporting the TPO, so glad to have you all here in the space, and look forward to being in more meetings with you.
And I guess I'll share some of the updates from the TPO side that, so at the last board meeting, the board approved the fiscal year 25 Unified Planning Work Program. So that is our budget and planning for the upcoming fiscal year, so starting July 1st. There's really 3 major initiatives that we're gonna be focusing on for the upcoming year. The 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan, which is due October of 26, and so we're about 2 years out. It's time to get started on that process, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the agenda later on. But a lot of the efforts that we're doing over this upcoming year are sort of constituent pieces, so updating our bike ped plan, updating some of our freight planning, things that'll feed into the long range plan. The second big thing we're undertaking this upcoming year is a rural public transportation study. So this came at the direction of the policy board, so back in, I think it was September. There was a lot of discussion about the new microtransit service that GRTC is launching around the region and whether that was meeting the needs of all of the rural localities. And so the board's direction was for the TAC and for staff to go back and review sort of the options for service in the rural areas and come up with a proposal that would provide service throughout the region that was sustainable and fiscally constrained. so something we can continue to afford moving forward. So this study is going to be looking at the 5 more rural counties across the region and figuring out what sorts of service is needed and how we can provide that service and how it could integrate with the broader GRTC network so we have an integrated public transportation system throughout the region. The last major initiative that we'll be focusing on for this upcoming year is the renewal of our safety efforts. So back in February, every year in February, the policy board has to set annual safety targets. So this is required by the federal government, and that's basically setting a number for how many people will die or be seriously injured on our roadways. And so this year, one of the things that we did was we actually went back to the basics and looked at all the options on how you set these targets. And one of the things that came from the TAC and from the policy board, there's been a lot of concern. And so we decided to set slightly more aggressive targets. Rather than continuing the trend of going upward, we said, let's try and hold things level. It's a step in the right direction. So as part of that, we're going to be reviewing our safety action plan. We're going to be reinitiating our regional safety work group so that we can come together and figure out at the regional level what is the role for the MPO to help promote safety and reduce the fatalities and injuries across the region. So that's a big new step, something we're excited about. So those are the 3 main initiatives. The full UPWP is, you can review the draft, it's on the Plan RVA website, and as soon as we get the final approvals from Federal Highways and Federal Transit, it'll be posted on there. So that's the main updates from the TPO side. That's, I think, all we had today.
Question.
Yes.
I think I heard just a day or so ago that, and I don't know if this is related to what you just talked about, the safety issue, but some of the, most of the accidents or fatalities in the region are occurring at a very highly defined number of locations, so it's not universally spread across the region.
That's correct. So we have, as part of the safety program and what we do, and every locality has the same thing, we map out where all the crashes are happening, and we have that high injury network that's mapped out, and it, for the most part, falls along with the arterials. So it's, the bigger roads, wider roads, those are the ones that we see a lot more, and we have those designated. We also have pedestrian safety corridors, which is really where the non-motorized fatalities and injuries are occurring. And so that's the other piece, and really looking at those 2 layers is kind of the foundation of starting with our safety efforts. Is we know where they're happening, now what can we do to actually help reduce those in those areas. So I think, like you probably heard at the Richmond Speed Symposium, I would imagine, but a lot of what they were talking about was how do we slow cars down through here, because speed is the primary driver of these issues. So it's looking at things like that, but then also at the regional level, some of the other stuff we can do is focus on the education campaigns across the region. So it's a consistent messaging across all 9 of our jurisdictions. So there's a lot of different things that we can do to be involved with it. But yes, it is starting with those key corridors.
Oh, just a quick follow-up. You know off the top of your head, what were our baseline 2023 numbers?
I can pull it up really quickly.
Okay, thanks. There's no bike ped numbers, we've been seeing the trend go up, and it's like, it's not what we want to see.
Sure, so the bike ped, serious injuries and fatalities was 110. So this is an average across the past 5 years. So that's what we're always measuring. And so our goal was to keep that constant. Now, I don't know what the annual number was, but that was the 5-year average. And then for fatalities across the region as a whole, it was 107. And that's the same, again, it's a 5-year average, but trying to hold that level.
And let me ask one more. This is probably can't answer it. It's ironic from a vehicular standpoint, we're seeing all the new technologies incorporated into new cars, airbags, adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist. Granted, what did I read, that the average car now is 12 years old, so that's just getting into that population. But intuitively you'd think, well, gosh, that must be making things safer. Any thoughts on that, or? No, you don't have to answer that. It's just probably a rhetorical question more than anything.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely something that comes up a lot, though. Larger vehicles and the vehicle technologies and how those are, that interplay and how that's actually contributing or not to the increase in fatalities and injuries that we're seeing. So I think that's definitely part of what we'll be looking at the regional task force and trying to figure out what we can do with this work group to steer the conversations.
One more question, and I'll be quiet. Are you gonna try to correlate the injury fatality crash trends with VMT and the vehicle miles traveled? Because during COVID, I think those numbers went down. And so it's like really counterintuitive to see a lack of correlation between a lot of these variables, it seems to me.
Yes, and I think that's been definitely one of the big observations for our work. So a lot of how we, as a substitute when we're planning out projects that aren't auto-centric, so for like a bike ped project, a lot of how we look at safety is, are we removing cars from the road, reducing the VMT, and that was always assumed that, okay, well, if we're reducing exposure, we're reducing the number and severity of these crashes, and it just hasn't been the case. So I think that's something we're gonna have to dive more deeply into, and I think at the state level, same sort of efforts.
Thanks.
Can I ask a question? Earlier in your comments, you used the term pedestrian corridor, and then we've been talking about bike ped. Are those two different things? And if so, what is a pedestrian? Give me some examples of a pedestrian corridor.
Yeah, sure. So these are the pedestrian safety action corridors that we've got
Right.
designated. So it's basically where there's a significant number of pedestrian injuries or fatalities on the roadway. So they're linked with those higher injury networks across the board, but it's just focusing on the more vulnerable road users.
So you might have a pedestrian corridor adjacent to it, like an arterial or something else.
Right, and that all comes through, so there's a pedestrian safety action plan, which is a state level plan, and so all these corridors are designated throughout the Commonwealth, so and it's broken down, I think it's like the top percentage for the state, top percentage for the region, top percentage for the locality, and it's a way to be able to look at those at different levels really quickly.
So, how would this regional safety plan interact with the fact that you propose projects based on safety, like you have a safety score? I mean, would there be any kind of interface between that?
Sure, so we have a safety plan already, so that's really just helping to identify where the corridors are. What the projects that we're evaluating then can also say, all right, well, this project is in that location and we're expecting that there's going to be a reduction in crashes because of this investment and this improvement. So, I mean, there's a definite crosswalk, but they're not directly talking to each other yet, and I think that's part of what we're figuring out by refocusing on that.
Just to go back to the rural public transportation policy study you talked about, can you just name the 5 counties?
Sure, so it'll be Charles City, New Kent, Hanover, Goochland, and Powhatan. So it's basically outside of where GRTC is serving now.
Awesome.
Are you next on the agenda as well?
I believe I am.
Cycle of public engagement?
Sure, so let me pull up, so this item, what we have is, if you recall, we've been looking at everything that we're doing through that circle, that planning cycle, and how everything that we're doing in public engagement relates to the overall planning process. So this is really a follow-up, so last meeting we talked about Henrico case, and we were looking at the first phase of the process, which is identifying the problems and the potential solutions. What we're focusing on this month is our prioritizing solutions. So this is really the long-range transportation plan part of the process. So this is where we pull together all the different solutions and problems that have been studied throughout the region, and then help to figure out which of these make the most sense for us to invest the limited dollars that we have in. And so just a little bit of context. So Connect RVA 2045 is our current long-range transportation plan. I mentioned we're getting ready to kick off the next one already, which feels so quick because we just wrapped this one up in 2021. But this plan really is focused on the larger scale projects. So major roadway capacity projects, the frequent transit network, major bike ped spines. So looking at like the Fall Line Trail. It's more of those scale of projects. A lot of the smaller stuff, individual intersection improvements, they're not specifically listed. We're not trying to get too much into the details on those. So that's one of the things to keep in mind when you're looking at the regional plan. But as part of developing the plan, what we go through is a cycle where we actually look at all of the issues across the region, look at which of those are in areas that would be regional in nature, and then look at potential solutions. So this is pulling in all the solutions from other plans that have been done, solutions that members of the public may propose, looking at issues that come out of a STAR study, an AMP study, any sort of state studies that are happening on the corridors. We also look at potentially the MPO developed solutions. So if there is a problem, the MPO could also come up with a solution and propose it, even though we haven't done that before in another study. So it could be like something that we work on as part of the process. So all of those are ways that solutions can come into the plan. The context for this particular case study is Forest Hill Avenue. In particular between West 47th Street and Prince George Road, and then over to Semmes Avenue. So if you are familiar with the area, we'll go into it a little bit more, but basically it's a 2-lane section in between 2 4-lane sections of the roadway. So it creates a bottleneck for people that are traveling along Forest Hill. And it is a different character from a lot of the other component pieces. So on the western and eastern end, you have a little bit more commercial development. It's on Semmes, it's the old streetcar line, so it was built a wider street. In this area, you have more residential. You have Forest Hill Park right up against the roadway, so it's a much more residential character. It's a little different from the either ends. So just for a quick visual, this is 47th and Prince George heading on Forest Hill. So you can see it's narrowing down to 2 lanes here. A little bit of commercial development right on the right. Everything behind it is largely commercial, so very different character. As you get into the kind of the core and the heart of this stretch, much more local street type character. So 2 lanes, bike lanes, sidewalks, the park's there. You've got church houses, and they're right off the road. And then when you get to the far other end at Semmes, it goes back to 4 lanes, got commercial development right at the corner, and then it is largely residential, but it's a wider road that already exists through there. So as part of the 2045 long-range plan, part of how we identified issues was to look at the travel demand model, look at what had already been funded, and then run the model out to 2045 and say, where are we going to run into issues with potential capacity constraints? And so running that model suggested that by 2025, we would see a potential capacity constraint along this section. So one of the proposed solutions was to widen it to 4 lanes. So just like on either end, let's make it 4 lanes throughout and remove that bottleneck. As part of the process, what we were doing is every major phase of the long-range plan, we took it out for public review before it was approved, and we were approving it by phases and then approving the overall plan so that there was a buy-in throughout the process. And part of this, we developed a mapping tool where we shared all of the potential, we were calling them the universe of projects. So these are all the potential solutions to the issues that we come up with, that the localities were considering, things that might move forward in the next 20-year plan. And we received a ton of comments on this one in particular. So the Forest Hill Neighborhood Association was tracking it closely, and they sent in a ton of comments. And really the focus on most of the comments that we received was not that there's not an issue on this roadway, it's not a capacity issue, it's a safety issue. We need to keep it slower, we need to slow traffic down, people need to be able to walk across the street because it is residential in character. So the big outcome and what came out of this process was that solution was ultimately just pulled out of the universe of projects. It wasn't something that advanced farther into the scoring process, and it wasn't considered when we developed the fiscally constrained plan. And then the city's planning efforts, which had already been looking more at the safer safety components, actually have advanced traffic calming and safety improvements. So if you look at the 2024 Richmond Connects, which is the city's plan, their near-term plan, they've got 2 safety projects in this stretch of the roadway. So the widening's out, and we're focusing on maintaining the character and actually making it safer for people who want to walk and cross the street there. So that's sort of the outcome. And again, this is just another opportunity where the public's involvement in the planning process helped to shape the outcomes and where we went with that long range plan. And happy to answer any questions about it.
I have a question, Miles, Madam Chair. Not pertaining to the public involvement so much, but the actual data that supports the traffic calming. Yes, people will go slower, but does that really divert people to a different path because they don't want to go slower? You know, okay, now we're back down to 35 miles an hour. There might be some cameras there in front of a school zone or some other deterrents for speeding. But what happens to the people that have been going down there at a high rate of speed? Do they slow down or do they find another route to go and carve through the neighborhood? You know, what are the statistics on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure in this particular corridor if we have an answer on that. But, I think the point that a lot of the residents raised, and I think the concern, Route 60, US 60, runs through a portion of this, but it's not on Forest Hill. So it's Midlothian Turnpike over on Roanoke and then over to Semmes. And so that is the designated commuting route. It's the major arterial, it's the state primary highway through there. So I think that was kind of a lot of what we heard was there is a designated route if you're commuting, and use that is a lot of what we're hearing. So I don't know in terms of practice if that's actually worked out the way it was intended, but.
Okay.
Lisa, I drive that corridor every day to get downtown to Bonham. And so I can tell you, first of all, the backups are not as bad as they used to be. The intersection right there by the park and the school has been improved, so it's a little wider.
Okay.
So that's helped, but when it does back up, people do cut through the neighborhood. In fact, they used to cut through the neighborhood a lot more, but there were probably, 4 or 5 blocks between Forest Hill and Riverside. And when stop signs were put on every one of those blocks, it cut down the cut-throughs a whole lot. So I would say right now, my perception is the cut-through problem is not too bad. So mainly people are just a little more patient. It takes another minute or two to get through that area, that's all.
Thank you.
If I can follow to it, I'd tell you, Jen, those flashers that they put by Forest Hill Park for people across the street, you're not playing Frogger anymore, which is nice.
Yes.
This leads me to kind of a continuing question on this. We finally got the section between RMA and Hathaway done, and I want to say we started the public hearings on that in 2009. Is there any data, crash data or anything else? Because I know as a cyclist, it seems a whole lot safer. It used to be pretty miserable. Unfortunately, the bigger problem with this is we've got this disjointed, disconnected corridor that you've got the gap between RMA and trying to cross over to get to Riverside is playing Frogger. But that stretch, if you wanted to commute by bike out to Hathaway Road or anywhere out there, riding down Forest Hill is suicide. And so, is there anything in the long-range plan for that? I've never seen it. B, is there any data about the new section and has that made things safer? My hunch is it has. But it's frustrating, this is 15 years later, and I want to say that section, 2 years ago? When are we ever gonna get that corridor fixed in the 2200 plan? I won't be around for it, but, if we don't have contiguous corridors, we're just kind of throwing stuff against the wall, it seems.
Sure, I think in terms of the data, we haven't pulled it, but I think that's something we could definitely look at, and that's part of what we're trying to build toward so that was a project that was largely funded through the RRTPO. So being able to go back and look at our investments and see if they paid off, I think is part of what we're trying to do as a program. And I think that would be a good starting point, actually, now that you mentioned it. So, but I know Forest Hill Phase 2 is in the works already. So the city is collecting funding and starting to put that through. I think it's going into Smart Scale this round. It's going through the CBTA. So there's definitely money starting to move to do the next stretch of the roadway. It's not hopefully going to sit for another 20 years before we can get the next section up and running.
Thanks.
For every highway widening plan in the region, this being an example at the moment, I would hope that going forward, we will have a transit and a land use option that can mitigate or obviate the need for highway widening. I think this whole part of Richmond is a transit not desert, but it's underserved by transit in general, and it's unfriendly for bicyclists in general. These larger issues need to be brought to the table. And the folks along Cary Street Road have done an excellent job of keeping that road slow and non-widened. I don't know how they did it, because it's a major thoroughfare. But we need to think beyond just widening roads. That's my stump speech of the day.
I will say, and I think this is something we'll hit on more in our next meeting. One of the very exciting new things that we're bringing to the long range plan this time around is scenario planning. So we've been working for the past 18 months on a scenario planning pilot for the region, which is actually developing models that are integrated: land use, transportation, building emissions, runoff, so we can actually look a little bit more holistically at the projects and their impacts across the board, not just in the transportation piece of it. So that's part of what we'll be talking about, I think, at the next meeting, because we'll be getting a little bit more into the long range plan and the scope of it. But that's something that we're trying to build toward, is actually being able to look at those pieces as a whole.
Okay. Is this LRTP engagement strategy?
Sure, so
All right.
I've got this one too. So this is on that topic. So for the next meeting, we are going to be diving into the engagement strategy for the 2050 long range transportation plan. So if you recall the whole setup and how we have everything working, there was a public engagement plan which we worked through and approved earlier this year. And that plan provides the framework. That's the plan to plan. And what we're moving on to now is the engagement strategy for the 2050 long range plan. So this is the actual specific outreach that we're planning and how we're going to get input at different phases of the plan development. I don't have a lot of information right now. I think the key is that staff is still working through the timeline and the major milestones. I think yesterday was our first preview at the scenario planning group that we've been working with, but we're working on finalizing a scope and exactly what the timeline will look like. At the July meeting, what we're going to be bringing back is that schedule for the project and working with CTAC to help develop the engagement strategy. So what type of outreach is needed when, how are we going to do it, which tools are we going to use from the toolbox that we've already adopted. And then throughout this process, we're going to be coming back to CTAC. We're going to be sharing the outcomes from each of our engagement efforts, the participation rates, but also what we heard. And then we can pivot as needed to adjust the strategy to make sure we're doing better as we move forward. As I mentioned earlier, this is going to be about a 2-year process. So we've got a lot of time to work on this. And this is our first go through with CTAC really steering the engagement strategy. So we're hoping that this will go smoothly and we'll bring it to you guys, but it's a learning process for everyone. So as we get through this, if things aren't working, please share with us, make sure that we know what we need to do better to make this work for everyone. But that was just my quick overview of the 2050 plan. And just stay tuned for the July meeting because we'll have more details for you then. Any questions?
I'll actually mention that while obviously there's a lot of opportunity to improve the strategy and everything, the strategies that were used for Connect RVA 2045 were certainly more effective than anything else I've experienced, at least in the sense that I and everybody I knew in my space knew that the plan was happening and was aware that there was public engagement going on in the region for a transportation plan. Not everybody exactly understood what it was for, but almost everybody I knew had at least seen Connect RVA 2045 somewhere and knew that there was something going on. So I think that speaks to at least some amount of success as far as the outreach from the previous one. So I think we should look at it very much as building on the success of the previous plan, rather than like, starting from nothing or something like that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And that was primarily virtual too, right? Because it was during the pandemic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Miles, one last question, and I've been involved with LRTP for 15, 20 years now. And it seems like, I mean, these projects have gotten so expensive, we put the money in, but it's like, once they're done, we never look back in the rearview mirror to see what they did. And I'll bring a case in point, like Huguenot Bridge, I think, was great, but I look at the Perham Road intersection, we spent, was it $32 million on that? And anytime I've driven through that intersection, I'm looking like, what did we accomplish here? Is there a way in this process that we might do a little 2020 look back at some of these projects? And not to fault anybody, but to say, hey, what could we have done better? Or what are our lessons learned to invest our money as wisely as possible moving forward? Does that make sense?
Sure, I think the whole idea of doing a performance-based plan is exactly that. So when we are evaluating projects, what we've moved toward, and this has been a gradual evolution of moving from, there was no budget constraint and you could pick the projects that seemed best for the region to, you have to work within a budget and you have to use data to actually pick projects based on those federal performance measures and the region's performance measures. But now that we're doing that, which is what we did in Connect RVA 2045, we can actually go back when projects are developed and say, all right, we were guessing that we would reduce crashes by 10%. How much are crashes actually down in this corridor? So I think that we are, because that plan is only 3 years old, we're not there yet. But I think we have the ability now, because we are putting numbers to things, that we can actually go back and check and see how we're doing.
Anyone else with questions?
I guess, so the long-range transportation plan is put together by the people, basically. I mean, people come out and they, wherever they're from, and they, say what their opinions are. So then you have the scoring of projects, which is over here. So what is the relationship between the results or what's in the long-range transportation plan and what gets funded? Does that really matter what federal funding things are, or does it matter what the region has determined they want to happen with their money?
It does matter. So basically the long-range transportation plan, we do a lot of public outreach. We get a vision for the region, we come up with the goals, and we pick how we're going to prioritize projects for our region. And then what comes out of it, and the main sort of purpose of the plan, is what's known as the constrained long-range plan. So that's where we've projected out revenue for 20 years, and we've said these are the projects that we can afford that are actually going to help us achieve that vision that we're shooting for. And those projects are the ones that are eligible to go out for federal money. So basically the way that it works is if a project's not in that list, in general, we either have to come back to the board and talk to them. Some of the smaller projects we don't, as I mentioned before, we're not too concerned about in terms of like making sure every single intersection improvement is listed, because that would just be a huge document that way. But if there's like a road widening type project and it's not listed in there, they have to come back to the MPO and ask for that plan to be amended. So there's another chance for the public to review it. There's extra steps. It takes a little bit longer. So I think the purpose is really that we're guiding which of those projects are moving forward into the Smart Scale program or into the TPO's funding programs, or where the money's actually going to get invested.
Okay. Next on the agenda, we've got a Who's in My Community follow-up. So who was here last week, or last meeting?
Michael was. I think everybody except maybe Stephanie. And we have a visitor who's come in. Should we say hi to our new visitor?
Yeah.
Hi,
Hey,
Ernest Moore from the Office of Equitable Transit and Mobility.
excellent,
I'm the alternate for Kelly Rowan.
great. Hi,
Welcome.
Ernest.
Glad to
Welcome.
have you.
So Ernest didn't get to the activity then either, but that's okay. I have a plan. So Sarah and Andrew and I have been chatting a little bit offline about this Who's in our community activity. So I think it was, I don't know if it was Sarah, was it your idea? Like, you all helped me kind of visualize this activity, because what you all were asking as committee members was, I don't exactly know all the places that the people are gathering in my own communities. And some of you are in different communities, and we should be utilizing that expansiveness. So I feel like we got a lot of good feedback at the last meeting about actually doing that and writing it down. John's not here, but he even said, I thought I knew all the places until I had to write it down, and then I realized there were some things I wasn't thinking about. So that was really great. And Faith, who's also not here, she said, this is the type of engagement I've always wanted for this group. So I really feel like it resonated with you all. So thank you for actively participating in that. So afterwards, we had all these pieces of paper with all of your texts, and I think, John, you were virtual, and so, everybody sent theirs in, and Andrew helped me digitize this. And so what I said is like, hey, we've got to get all this in one place. And so what Andrew did is take a first crack at getting this all in one place virtually so that we can see it and we can share it with each other. So Miles, do you want to share the visual? And this is not finished, but this is just even at a first crack of how could we both have everybody's different communities in one place, and then how can we make it a searchable, usable database kind of thing, right? So the first, this was just literally like, here's everybody on the left-hand side of who they were and what jurisdiction they're in, and then at the top, the colored bars were the kind of type of community group. So there was who are the media in my town, and then if you scroll to the right, there is, what's that one, like community hubs, and that includes large and small gathering spaces. And then I think there's some more to the right. What is this? Community groups specifically, like neighborhood associations or nonprofits. In the special interests, we're getting into like who are the advocacy groups, who are the people who live in transportation that we want to make sure we're talking to, and then community organizations specifically serving underserved populations, because that is a mandate for a lot of our funding, is making sure that we're including groups that might not always get access to or are considered underserved in our community. So even just having this was like, wow, this is cool. And also seeing the overlap was cool. If you go back to the left, Miles, and then even just scroll down a little so folks can kind of see the types of things that are on here. Obviously in media, there's only so much media in the region, right? So there was a lot of overlap there, but some of the smaller blogs and things that come up are the kinds of things that we don't know about. So this is even just really enlightening having all of this in one place. The second tab that's on this spreadsheet, Miles, is where Andrew was essentially trying to group this in a way that was searchable, right? And so this was like, okay, let's put the type of resource it is. So, library, where is it? And then how do we check off on the right-hand side where the jurisdiction is so that we can easily sort them? So this is the part that's not finished yet, but I wanted to show you this because I thought, wow, this is great. Because one of the things you all are asking, and I think we should continue asking, is where are these places? But I think that you can tell that this is going to require a little bit of maintenance to keep it working. So my question back to CTAC is this something that we think we want to keep up as a resource? And if so, I think we might need some volunteers to help kind of look at it. And one of the suggestions I'm gonna have is that we bring this back every meeting and we check in with each other. So I think it both requires just a little bit of extra like, hey, if I wanna be one of the leaders in maintaining this database of all of our contacts, and obviously the staff would be available too, but Andrew's like, I can't do this all by myself, and I can't do it all by myself as me, but I think as a group, we could take a little bit of collective responsibility for it. So my first question is, does that feel like a tool that would be useful? Yeah, I'm seeing some nodding.
I think the tool is useful, whether or not we need to bring it back every meeting.
Okay.
Might be a little too often.
Okay.
If what you're talking, I don't know whether you're trying to do that to stimulate people to take more action, like us, or whether it's just to make sure this is current. If you're just trying to keep it current, I don't think it needs to be every meeting.
Yeah,
But
it's also the first thing you said, yeah. But good point, yes. Okay, so my second thought of this was if it's worth it to revisit this each time, because things change, do we want to set some goals for ourselves as a committee of, hey, how is it going with seeing, knowing, going to, being aware of any of these groups in your community, right? So like if Lisa is active in her Kiwanis group in her county, has she talked to those folks lately? You know, like what are our touch points? And so I like structure. I think Sarah said to me like, hey, structure is sometimes useful. Do we want to set ourselves some goals do we want to try to achieve like, hey, we have 2 touch points in our community every month or in between our 2 monthly meetings? our job is to go talk to 5 people somewhere, like, I feel like helping put a little bit of guidelines around that. And I don't wanna give anybody homework, but again, you guys are our outreach arms. You're helping us get to the places where we can't get to, and in a region of 1.5 million, we need all the help we can get for that.
Just one concern about that,
Yeah.
because we've got a big population here.
Yeah,
And with something like transportation, you need to be real focused on your message.
yes,
And more important, you need to make sure your message is correct.
yeah,
And if we don't, I don't wanna say we want to hamstring anybody in what they say, but you can create a lot of headaches
yeah,
by putting the wrong message out. And that's my only concern with this many people.
Yeah.
If we suddenly have 8 or 10 different stories out there,
Mhm.
you all as staff could find yourself in a whack-a-mole
Yeah.
situation, putting out fires
Yeah.
that are caused with the best intentions, but
Yeah.
inadvertently.
well,
Just a thought.
excellent point, and I think it was John Leonard who brought up the idea of talking points and a media toolkit, which would be part of what we would do for that. So I think once we start the LRTP actual activities, then we will know specifically what are the kinds of things we wanna ask and what, and so that'll be a lot simpler. I don't want us to wait until we have an actionable thing for us to start building and continue to build those relationships. So I think at this stage, I'm not saying go with these 3 talking points. What I think I'm asking is, are we even touching these communities? Like, is it worth it even without a specific ask to just say, hey, I'm on CTAC, here's what CTAC is, and here's my role in this agency. And let me just make sure that you know about us. Hey, like, I care about this. Sarah, did you have a thought?
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking is kind of like coming up with a boilerplate, like introduction, hello, I'm a part of CTAC in the community, and then with some resources like here's who here's how you can participate in public comment regarding projects, here's how you can get more information about what's happening in these meetings. Just kind of to introduce people to the fact that all of this exists and this is how transportation gets decided and approved. Cause I think there's a lot of people that don't know that.
Yeah.
I would totally second that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a little bit biased maybe because what I do is community engagement work, but anytime that we have the opportunity to talk to people about what's happening in the community, I think it's a positive. You don't have to make promises or, have all of your ducks in a row before you have that conversation, just to bring people into the conversation. Yeah, it's really powerful.
I would piggyback off of what Stephanie is saying because awareness, bringing awareness to the community about agencies like this is so important, so that people will know what opportunities they have to voice what they imagine for the city and transportation especially.
And part of the introduction, I think, could be, as a member of the CTAC, I'm willing to bring your questions up in a meeting with other members, like other transportation professionals. So if you have a question about something and they don't wanna or are unable to take the time to show up at our public comment period, when at the beginning of every meeting we say, are there any public comments? A lot of people aren't comfortable with that. A lot of people don't know about that sort of thing.
here.
Yeah, so they could ask you, and then in that public comment period, we could also say, are there any public comments, or does anybody want to relay any public comments? And comments, questions, anything like that, you could be speaking for the people who you're talking to from here.
It's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah, so like by maybe this July meeting where we're gonna go over more of this engagement stuff, do you think it would be a good idea to try and develop something, an introduction you could start sending out, and to also kind of like finalize our lists of people for the
Yeah, I think an easy thing we could give you back is the electronic version of your own list, right? So I think that already exists, so that I would love, we could just at least send you. And then for those of you who didn't get to do it, I can send it to you so you can start filling it out. But that way you have it, and then, yeah, I think it could be just a personal check, is say, let me just update this before every CTAC to say, hey, where have I been? Let me make sure all these people are on here. And then I think taking it a step further is it useful for us to set ourselves some targets? Like, I wanna talk to 2 different groups in between CTAC, or 5 different groups, like what's the right, let's set an ambitious goal that feels doable but isn't so hard that it feels like homework.
Yeah, and I mean, and could that also go into the description of what this role is? Like, when people apply for it through their jurisdictions, or I'm not sure how it works in other jurisdictions.
When we get to the membership part where we said like, hey, as part of your job, this is gonna be one of the things we ask for you.
Yes,
Okay, accountability, yeah.
some knowledge beforehand, like, hey, you might be asked.
You might be asked to talk to the people in your communities, hey, yeah. Because there's probably some things you all are going to anyway that are not related to transportation, but that is okay, that's not the point. Like, we need the people who don't know about transportation to care too. Because you're gonna be that conduit, yeah. Yeah,
What I did not see on the list, and it might be there, is faith communities.
yeah, I wonder if that,
They're
They're
under,
major stakeholders in.
I think it's, we put it under gathering spaces.
yeah, under large gathering spaces, we have like churches, schools, sort of parts of those communities.
Yeah, I guess we didn't put it as its own category, but if we felt like it needed to be,
Yeah.
we could do that, yeah.
Yeah, I
It
think
might
that that
be-
would be a huge category that's needed because a lot of our population of communities of opportunity, that's their only source of being made aware of
That's fair.
these kind of opportunities.
Yeah, are there any so it's under large gathering spaces, I think, did anybody name any?
Some people did, there were a couple of churches.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, so small gathering.
Because all of the faith communities don't have large gathering space.
That's true, that's true.
Yeah, we should probably put a.
Like pull out
category
a
under-
category
community
specifically,
groups.
yeah, good point, okay. So, I think what I'm hearing is that things we can do is we will get you your electronic version of your own answers.
Can I
Yeah.
clarify that for a second? I
Yes.
think it'd be helpful not for you just to send me my
Uh-huh.
list, but the entire list.
Yeah.
Because if I look at what Lisa submitted, I might go, oh, yeah, there's a whole category I hadn't thought of. Let me add some things.
Yes. So I will say yes to that, but then we also need some volunteers to help maintain the list, right? So I think that we have what's here. We're gonna get it in a shareable file. This is just in Google right now, so this is not shareable with you, but yeah, I kind of want to hear if anybody feels passionate about this. It's like, hey, can you just check in with staff to say, hey, this needs updating, or send it to us when it needs updating. Yeah,
I mean, I can help too.
yeah? Sarah's interested? Andrew, I think, already raised his hand for that. Yeah, anybody else feel strongly?
I do wanna add, when we talk about like maintaining the list and everything, if you look at the second tab, what I was doing is, like, I don't wanna say like vetting, like we don't believe you when you put it in there, but trying to get more information and find maybe points of contact listed on that organization's page. I tried to provide a URL for every one of them if they had an online presence.
Yeah.
Something like that, just so that instead of just the name in there, we can actually, when looking at the resource, we can see more information about it. So it requires a little bit of homework.
Yeah.
To actually like look up the organization, try to find them online, which can be very difficult sometimes. And then provide that in a concise way where
Yeah.
people can understand what they're looking at and find the resource that matches what they want to share or who they could reach out to.
Or physical address if they don't have an online presence, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't look for those yet, cause I was just trying to provide a proof of concept
Yeah,
basically,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, physical address would be good as well.
Okay, so that's helpful. So yeah, I think we can share everything with everybody. Lisa?
I don't know if you're familiar with VDOT public hearings, they do them every spring, getting feedback about transportation projects. And it's very poorly attended usually. But people are, they're reluctant to drive to a different locality, to talk about projects in their district or in their county. What if we had, at least a handful of regional meetings conducted by the RVA staff, the TPO staff, and some of us to coordinate at least, let's say, 5 of them. And then we could use that as the model for people to go to the smaller groups that they might be a member of. But I think it needs to be presented first. I just think, most of us, you might have a casual conversation with somebody about, hey, what do you think we need in transportation? But in terms of trying to set up a meeting, most of us are gonna scratch our heads about how is this gonna happen without some structure on what we are a part of.
Yes,
I just feel
absolutely.
like that
No,
needs to set the stage.
You're 100% correct, and that's what we're gonna be doing as part of the strategy at the next meeting and beyond. So yes, I'm thinking like in the in-between times, what are we doing, right? Because I don't want you all to feel like, oh, well, there's nothing to act on, so there's nothing I can do. You're still valuable being out in the community in that meantime, so yes. And Lisa, you're giving me to my next point, which is the kind of question about engagement in a box, right? So that was one of the tools that was in our public engagement plan. And actually somebody from RVA Rapid Transit, Courtney, who is the one who spoke at our transportation forum, right? She was the transit rider who spoke, and now she works for RVA Rapid Transit. She asked me at the speed management symposium this week, when are you getting the engagement in the box? I want it. And I'm like, yay, great, I don't have it yet. So I think that that kind of thing is like setting up that strategy could be, we have regional meetings and then we give you what you need as members to be able to easily take it, to champ your point about like messaging being consistent and knowing what to say. Absolutely. So I feel like as we build the strategy, I think we've already got 3, so that's great, yeah. And related the media toolkit and talking points. So that's coming too, like we've already kind of started that. So I think to even just get going with, hey, I'm a CTAC member and here's 2 things I want you to know, we can send you that in the next couple weeks, right? And then you can get started. So that by July, you can come with, I've got some ideas of the places in my community I want to start with. And maybe you've already gone, extra points to you if you already go and chat with them between now and July. Does that feel doable?
Doable.
What's a good number? What's a good number I could say? Holly asked me to talk to 4, 17, 95, wait, $1, right? What feels like a ambitious goal? I heard 2, 3, 3. Can I, going once, going 3? We'll start with 3,
What,
just
in
between now and July.
2.
2. Between now and July, find 2 places in your area, probably from your own list, but maybe somebody new inspires you, to go and just talk about CTAC with the 4 sentences we're gonna send you an email about why it matters, and to give them a little bit of an exciting heads up that some actionable things are coming their way. Yeah? I see nods, okay.
And I could say that if it's not in this spreadsheet, if it's not on the list, email me and Sarah and Holly, and we'll add it to the list so that we're keeping track of that relationship.
Yeah, if you get something new. For right now, we'll just do it that way. We'll come up with an easier way to do that in the future, but yeah. Yeah,
Are these like emails or you want people to go there?
I think I want you to go there, whether that is virtual or in person, right? Like, cause just an email is not necessarily as powerful. I will leave that up to you, but I think emailing them is like, well, if it's gonna be email, I want you to email 50, right? So think about it, and if it doesn't work out, that's okay, you know, like, life happens, but I think setting ourselves some goals will help us get out more. And I know that you all feel better, I think, when you've got something tangible. I always feel better if I have something tangible, but you can tell them the tangible's coming. And then when we're done with this portion, I have 2 actionable things you can take that are not technically related to the LRTP, but are related to our work. So you could cheat and use that. So that's coming. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Just about this meeting structure. So I know you asked for public comments at the beginning. What is the structure there? Like, do you have a certain amount of time? Is it a certain amount of comments you would hear? Do you have kind of?
Well, I think one of the reasons that we're doing something like this is because nobody is ever here to public comment.
At the policy board, they do
Yeah.
more. So like the policy board meetings have time for open comment, and sometimes when there are actionable items, people do come or share there. And sometimes that feels like,
What you're expecting. Like,
Yeah.
if we get, as we get more engaged with community, then people will want to come.
yeah,
These
maybe,
meetings, I
yeah.
guarantee you.
Okay.
Like, that's how that works, so,
Yeah.
just maybe think about that, like, okay, how many comments a meeting do we have time for?
Yeah, do we need to start putting some parameters around that? I don't think we're even there yet. I know that happened at CVTA, I think, was like, do we need to start timing them? Martha, do you have a thought on that?
I think our written policies state a time limit of 3 minutes.
Okay.
That hasn't been necessary to enforce strictly because oftentimes there aren't people in large volumes to do that. You guys probably know this, but a lot of the localities will do things like where they have an active or engaged citizenry, they will actually break the public comment period into two sections. So one will be if there's anyone here to speak and address the board on items on the agenda today, right? And so that way they clear those comments at the beginning, and then if there are other kind of more generalized open comments, they'll save those to the end. I think that happened a lot in communities because there was a recognition that there were a lot of people in the audience that were being paid by the hour to be there. And it was becoming, so it felt in some communities like it was a deterrence of public comment because you had to sit through the whole meeting to be able to say your piece. But it was really a recognition that the lawyers and the development personnel in the community were getting paid by the hour to sit there for what could have sometimes have been maybe like an hour and a half public comment period. And so that was the sort of compromise that a lot of jurisdictions across Virginia have made to be able to make the space, but also be respectful of the people who had business before the body. That, and again, I think largely speaking about local governments who meet in the evening time, where it could be midnight and
so still going on.
So we have not, I think your point is well made, like if you build it, they will come, and we wanna make sure that we're approaching it that way as opposed to inviting the public to come and then realizing that we don't have a welcoming format for them.
Yeah, just guidelines.
And so I think all of that can be part of what this group, my hope would be, and I think Holly and Miles and Ken share this hope. You all could help us think through these things so that we're not ill-prepared and clumsy and unwelcoming, and it's like, you told me I'm supposed to come here and my voice is gonna be heard, and then it didn't feel that way. So I think we would really like to be able to better leverage this group to help us think through the implications of what we're trying to do and make sure we don't fall flat at the end. Sorry for the interruption.
That was great, thank you.
Okay, additional comments?
Questions? I think that's it for me. Two, homework is 2. And you'll get maybe some fun prizes if you do more, because I like prizes. And if you have ideas about that, come see me. Okay, 2 things that are the actionable things that I do have for you before you go. So take one and pass it down. This is Plan RVA's next big event, which is June 13th, which is Plan RVA Day. This is now the 2nd annual gathering of all of the many things we are doing as an organization. And so this is the afternoon of the 13th. It's from 12:15 to 5:30. There are 3 sessions. You can come to 1 or all or 2, any of signing up per session. And registration is now open, so if you scan that QR code, you can go ahead and register. It's free. Lunch is included if you come to the first session. But where Plan RVA Day kind of came out of was, hey, there are lots of folks that know us for transportation or know us for bike ped or know us for hazard mitigation, but don't realize all of the other work we're doing. And so a lot of the questions came up was like, hey, could there be a place where we hear about all of the work you're doing or go a little deeper on something that might be outside of the thing I know? So last year was pretty transportation focused, and this year it's not so much. We actually are featuring different things. So we're actually gonna highlight a little bit more of our collaborative relationships, specifically around using good data about regional mobility, upward mobility indicators. Folks from the Urban Institute in DC are coming to talk a little bit about their data history and then work with the anchor institutions in Richmond that are doing this work. So there are a couple of different organizations. Plan RVA is one of them, Community Foundation, Partnership for Housing Affordability, Chamber RVA, United Way, that are working on kind of trying to measure what like regional indicators are around the health of upward mobility. And so those sessions, especially the last 2, data driven and housing for all, are going to kind of tie together about that. And then the first session, which might actually be most applicable to you all, is we're going to bring the media in to talk about what good public engagement looks like and what they want to hear and how you can pitch to them. And I also want people who come to that session to bring their good ideas, right? I was like, if you've seen it done well somewhere, bring it and share. Let's help each other. If you're in a locality or you're from out of state and you've done a really good good engagement, I want to know about it. So this you can share as well. We will send you this electronically with some talking points after the meeting, so you can share it with your networks, but it's also on our social media pages if you want to share from there. And I'll add that I'm pretty sure I got my job because of Plan RVA Day last year, because I went to Plan RVA Day when I was employed somewhere else and was reminded how much I love planning and transportation and this work. And then shortly after, this job opened up and I applied for it. So I give Plan RVA Day a lot of credit for me being here for now. So maybe good things like that could happen to you. Okay, so step 2 that you can share is our climate resilient plan. Now, I don't have anything good to hand you right now because we are still building it. However, you might have heard us talk about that in our environmental programming, we have a grant from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to work on climate pollution reduction. Now, some of that does affect transportation. In fact, there's a whole work group about transportation that is involved in that. But what we will have coming soon, basically in next week, we'll have some language, a survey, and some community ideation sessions where we're gonna ask for public input around ways we can reduce greenhouse gas reduction in our region. I don't have any more information on that right now, other than to tell you that the website where you can keep up with this is climateresilientrva.org. We will also send you that afterwards, climateresilientrva.org. And so this is, it will touch transportation, right, but it is not specifically underneath the TPO. So these are 2 things that when you go and talk to your 2 community folks, you can say, hey, here are some things you could do right now. Come to Plan RVA Day if this speaks to you, and fill out our online survey, and or come to one of our ideation sessions.
So this is designed for anybody to come to, not just the people on the policy board, CTAC,
Which thing?
the Plan RVA Day?
It is. I think the people who would care about it are the people who
Yeah.
work in this world. But if you're a very engaged public person who cares about this, yes, it is open to them too. I don't know that it's necessarily like somebody who doesn't know any of this is gonna wanna come or pay attention. So, but yes, it is open to the public. But space is limited because it's gonna be right here in this room. And we're gonna reconfigure the tables around, but this room only has so many bodies. So if you're real excited, register soon. Yeah, Andrew.
Is the GHG thing you mentioned, is that the climate action plan that I've seen a draft
Probably,
copy of?
yes.
Okay.
So we started this process of asking for input in February. So we had our first crack at it where we got 800 respondents to tell us what direction would you like to go? And so we got a little bit of that feedback. And now we have work groups that are continuing to take that and get even deeper and starting to create some measures. So we will first be communicating with those people. So if you filled that out, you're gonna get the first communication, which is, hey, here's the next step. Please do X. Yes, good question. Thank you. So we're doing a lot at Plan RVA, you guys. So like, even though you're here for CTAC, I want your great brains out there talking about all of our stuff if you feel so compelled. So, thank you. That's it for me.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for the Who's in My Community follow-up? And now we have a status report on the CTAC membership.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to give everybody a brief update on where we are in terms of our CTAC membership. And let me start off, first of all, by thanking all of you for being faithful representatives. And also particularly want to recognize our newest members today, Stephanie and Ernest. Thank you all for being with us today. And I think as everybody knows, we have 9 jurisdictions that are represented here on CTAC. And each jurisdiction can appoint 1 or 2 representatives depending on the bylaws. The larger jurisdictions are entitled to 2, the smaller ones 1 each, plus an alternate. And where we find ourselves right now is we have 5 jurisdictions that have either alternate or actually member vacancies. And I think it's no secret that we can't be an effective group if we're not fully represented. We're working with the jurisdictions, we're in contact with them now, and we're gonna be doing some follow-up. Martha's gonna be meeting with leadership, I think in the coming weeks. But I just wanted to make you all aware of this, that we are trying to fill these positions. We recognize the importance of it.
Which are the 5, Ken?
I'm sorry, the five that are lacking right now, Charles City is lacking a member and an alternate. Hanover is lacking an alternate. Henrico is lacking an alternate. New Kent's lacking an alternate. And Powhatan is lacking a member and an alternate. Additionally, Henrico and Chesterfield are entitled to additional full members You know, right now, we only have one representative from Chesterfield and one from Henrico. They're entitled to an additional one. But Charles City, Hanover, Henrico, New Kent, Powhatan. Martha, did you want to say anything about, what your efforts might entail along those lines? I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ken. I mean, really, we tend to communicate very formally with our local governments, and my hope is to be able to sit down and have more of a casual conversation to share the more recent conversations over the last, 9 months, I'll say, that this group has had about zeroing in on kind of a purpose and, these discussions so that they can better understand as they're thinking about candidates who might be willing to serve, they can better say, would you be willing to serve, and this is what the purpose of the organization is, and this is how you compete in, this is why it's worth your time, that kind of thing. So just really kind of trying to convey that verbally, which is sometimes hard to do in, a form letter. And then I think also just to be able to get a pulse check from each of the jurisdictions if they have suggestions on the at-large memberships as well. I know that that's a topic that this group is talking about, but just in any way that the localities might say, hey, we've had good interaction with this group, they might have somebody that's interested, that kind of a thing. There's this person that's interested in plugging in, so. And we're doing the same at the Planning District Commission board level. We've been undergoing over the last year or so an intentional effort to better engage our commissioners who fill our citizen and planning commission seats. And so they sit on a committee that's really geared toward leveraging their positions in the community. And so I think there might be an opportunity in the future for this group and that group to meet together sometimes and, kind of across the bodies, be able to think more strategically about community engagement and what this looks like. So.
Thanks, Martha.
Is that okay, Ken?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was just gonna say, as some homework for the members of the committee, if you all know of individuals in your community or in other communities that I mentioned who might be good candidates for CTAC, we would appreciate you passing that information on to us. Because it'd be, we could then take that and say, hey, it's been called to our attention that so-and-so might be a good candidate. And we could, put that name before the respective, supervisor and say, would you concur with that? Lisa, do you have a comment?
I would suggest adding VACO and VML to your list of outreach contacts. They have leadership academies, and they might have some suggestions of some of the representatives from the localities that have been through that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Martha, do we have vacancies at the board and CVTA level from jurisdictions, or are they all filled now?
Let's see, Janice, help me. The elected official seats for CBTA, the TPO, and the commission are all filled. We might have a question mark here and there of an alternate, but I don't actually think we do have any openings.
No, the only, there are a couple vacant alternate spots for elected officials, but that would have to be a board of supervisors representative from that particular county.
And I'll give an example. I don't think we have the alternate position filled for Henrico, but that's because all 5 board members are on the board and there is no person. So, yeah, I think actually our last vacant appointee was just sent to us about a week or so ago. Which is fast considering the amount of change that has happened in the local governments and the appointments and everything. And they happen sort of, the other place that we see vacancies or shifts is sometimes in the technical advisory committees. And that's largely just because of, transitions in staff and assignments and turnover and things like that.
Okay, so again, if you know of potential candidates, please, send me that information. And we're gonna continue to, be in discussion with these boards and ask them to identify, appropriate individuals. And again, want to thank you all for your continued dedicated service to this body.
Any questions, comments?
Is there a question online? Oh, we're in the chat.
No. Okay.
Alright, on to other business, the Plan RVA newsletter.
I think that's just, we have this here every time, right? So we're like, hey, be a part of our newsletter, get all the information, share with your friends.
Any additional member comments then?
All right, 2-1, and maybe this is for a possible meeting topic. I haven't been going to VDOT meetings like I used to, but I've heard through the grapevine, there've been some real tweaks to Smart Scale. And is it just me, or would that be helpful to see how Smart Scale tweaks might impact some of our LRTP recommendations? I see some smiles over there.
I work for Smart Scale, so
Yeah.
I don't know if you were hearing about the changes from the review that happened last year and the CTV adopted in December. Is that where you're
I
referring
think
to?
it is. I just know that for years that was untouchable. It was the holy grail, and all of a sudden,
I mean, I would
got
say
tweaked.
that there have been a number of system-wide reviews that have been conducted on Smart Scale. I think this past round, it was a bit higher profile. The review was done by ourselves and a consultant this time. The last time, I believe it was done by JLARC.
but what I'm talking about, the scoring criteria, I hear that the formula got
Like the
tweaked.
land use.
Yes, so as far as land use goes, that was removed and then it was put back in because they reviewed it and it was actually in the code required, so it wasn't legal for them to take it out at the board level. That would have to be done by legislation. So as far as that goes, that's back how it was before. We are changing the way that we calculate land use, where it's now a multiplier instead of its own scoring criteria. So you won't receive land use points, your score will be multiplied by a factor derived from the land use surrounding your project, which was intended to balance the impact land use had on the overall scoring process, because in round 5, land use dominated the scoring. There were a number of projects that were funded entirely on the land use metric, which doesn't really meet what Smart Scale is trying to do. So we're thinking it's a bit more balanced this way. That's what the CTB adopted. I don't think there were other, can you think of off the top of your head of any other major scoring changes? I don't think there were.
The
mostly-
congestion measures, the other, like how the measure.
They changed the year that they look at for projecting traffic volumes to 7 years. It's 7 now. But those are the only changes to scoring. There are some changes to eligibility that are much harder to communicate in a few sentences, but yeah, those are the scoring impacts.
I wouldn't mind hearing sort of a review of how we're doing on Smart Scale. You know, going back, say, 3 years or something, you know, what progress have we made? How CBTA dollars affected what we're doing? You know, just kind of a quick overview of what we've accomplished.
Sure. I mean, it was always a little bit of voodoo magic to me, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I think we could come back for, like, at the next meeting and give a little bit more of an update. We've done this with both the CBTA and with the policy board and given the overview of the changes this round and sort of the impact of having leveraging funding. So we could give kind of more of a holistic view.
You know, executive summary, I
Yeah.
don't wanna know all the nitty gritty, but like I said, to me, it's always been kind of a black box. And then sort of the black box has changed.
If you wanna read the technical guide, that's all mine.
Not enough coffee in the world.
Sure.
But so it sounds like that's something that also would help all of the members here kind of discuss with their community and be a little bit more knowledgeable. Is there anything else that anyone wants to suggest that we talk about or inform ourselves about?
I've got one other quick comment, just
Yeah.
want to let everybody know. I've been appointed by the Federal Highways Administration to the, they are doing a new rail trail engineering and design guide book. They did one about 5 years ago, and I'm gonna be on that. And this is where you build trails along active rail lines. I'm all about that, Michael. But actually, I think in our region, we got a number of really great opportunities for that. How we do these safely and to the as effectively as possible. So anyway, we're excited to be there, flattered to be there, and hopefully we'll have the report out in a couple of years. And who knows, by the time I'm 105, we may see a couple of these in the region.
Very good.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I guess I was gonna ask, you covered funding 2 meetings ago, right? Cause I remember there's a brief mention of Smart Skill there, or would that be upcoming?
That will actually be the next meeting, so it's be a
Okay,
perfect
okay.
tie-in
That's what I
to
was
Smart
gonna
Scale
ask,
with
is
the
it-
funding phase.
Okay. I just remember there was a mention of Smart Skill a couple of meetings ago.
Okay, and then would it be helpful too for like next meeting to try and solidify some sort of proposal of how many people we reach out to or what that kind of looks like outline wise?
See how successful 2 was and see if it feels like you wanna bump it to 50 and then we can talk, yeah? Okay, yeah.
In that case, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Oh, do we need a second?
Second.
All right,
You got it.
thank you. Excellent meeting. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.